I wanted to talk about Ta-Nehisi Coates at some point. I mean, I don't know if he'll be in the news during our next stream, but I feel like it's a related issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can you pull the clip of him like getting like I don't know anything, like there's this new controversy about him on an interview with Trevor Noah, and there was the Today Show with that guy with blow-dried hair kind of dressing him down.
Yeah, well, let's play this clip first. So yeah, the latter clip you're talking about was on CBS, and this complete hack said that Ta-Nehisi Coates' book belonged in the backpack of extremists. But this,
what's his name again?
Tony something. But
Tony.
But this one I can play. This is Ta-Nehisi Coates speaking to Trevor Noah, and the right wing freaked out about this one because Ta-Nehisi Coates basically expresses empathy with the people who carried out October 7th, saying
Tony Dakupil.
Yeah. We'll play that one in a second, but here he is talking about how he could understand how someone could carry out October 7th.
And I haven't said this out loud, but I think about it a lot. Where 20 years old, went into Gaza, which is a giant open-air jail. And what I mean by that is if my father is a fisherman and he goes too far out into the sea, he might get shot by somebody off of, the side of Israeli boats. If my mother picks the olive trees and she gets too close to the wall, she might be shot. If my little sister has, cancer and she needs treatment because there are no, facilities to do that in Gaza, and I don't get the right permits, she might die. And I grow up under that oppression and that poverty, and the wall comes down. Am I also strong enough or even constructed in such a way where I say, this is too far? I don't know that I am. I don't know that I am.
So the right's freaking out about that. My only critique there is he's sort of portraying people who attack their military occupiers as some like barbaric act. Like that's how I kind of, when really it's just an act of military resistance. So he doesn't even, I think, need to go that far in trying to psychoanalyze the psychology of October 7th, because, look, you can criticize it for its prudence and whether it was tactically wise. I mean, that's, I think, fair game, but it's simply just people resisting military occupation. It's not some like the operation itself. I mean, yes, there were individual atrocities, but the operation itself was just an act of military resistance against a foreign occupier, which is not hard to understand. It doesn't require deep psychology.
Yeah, it wasn't the same. Well, I don't know. Maybe he's, likening it to Nat Turner's revolt where, everyone on the plantation got killed.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But
which he talked about in that clip. He does actually. He does actually mention that too.
Okay, but this has become some big scandal because you're not allowed in any way contextualize or rationalize an occupied population taking up arms against its occupier when the occupier is Jewish, because you're just not allowed to. Because why? I mean, it's pretty obvious. You can talk about people in Sri Lanka fighting against their occupier, the Tamil people. No one cares in the US media. There's just something so personal about Israel. And what he's doing is so upsetting also because he is a prominent Black intellectual. And the Black intellectual as a anti-colonial, anti-establishment force had been neutralized since the Clinton era, when they were all kind of taken into the White House. And those who resisted were Sister Souljah and Henry Louis Gates Jr. And figures like him were turned into national celebrities. And so to be a Black intellectual in America now means to be liberal. And Ta-Nehisi Coates was a project of that same liberal intelligentsia, that same liberal elite, which is what I want to talk about. And now he's going off the plantation that they established for him.
Yeah, he wrote for the Atlantic magazine, which is edited by a former Israeli prison guard, Jeffrey Goldberg, Iraq war propagandist. So he was the darling of that whole scene. And now the Atlantic is publishing hit pieces against them. They just came out with one.
They did?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
can we play that the other clip first before we kind of go into the history here?
Can. Yes, we can.
I imagine if I took your name out of it, took away the awards and the acclaim, took the cover off the book, the publishing house goes away, the content of that section would not be out of place in the backpack of an extremist. And so then I found myself wondering, why does Ta-Nehisi Coates, who I've known for a long time, read his work for a long time,
You've known him for a long time, you can't even say his name right. He calls him Ta-Nehisi. You know, it's a side note, but still, it's, I don't know. I think it's revealing.
Yeah.
guy, leave out so much? Why leave out that Israel is surrounded by countries that want to eliminate it? Why leave out that Israel deals with terror groups that want to eliminate it? Why not detail anything of the first and the second intifada, the cafe bombings, the bus bombings, the little kids blown to bits? And is it because you just don't believe that Israel in any condition has a right to exist?
Well, I would say the perspective that you just outlined, there is no shortage of that perspective in American media. That's the first thing I would say. I am most concerned always with those who don't have a voice, with those who don't have the ability to talk. I have asked repeatedly in my interviews whether there is a single network, mainstream organization in America with a Palestinian American bureau chief or correspondent who actually has a voice to articulate their part of the world. I've been a reporter for 20 years. The reporters of those who believe more sympathetically about Israel and its right to exist don't have a problem getting their voice out. But what I saw in Palestine, what I saw on the West Bank, what I saw in Haifa in Israel, what I saw in the South Hebron Hills, those were the stories that I have not heard. And those were the stories that I was most occupied with. I wrote a 260-page book. It is not a treatise on the entirety of the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
But if you were to read this book, you would be left wondering, why does any of Israel exist? What a horrific place, committing horrific acts on a daily basis. So I think the question is central and key.
Great question.
If Israel has a right to exist, and if your answer is no, then I guess the question becomes, why do the Palestinians have a right to exist? Why do 20 different Muslim countries have a right to exist?
My answer is that no country in this world establishes its ability to exist through rights. Countries establish their ability to exist through force, as America did.
Another great
good point. Yeah, no country has the right to exist. That's just
exactly
completely made up.
Yeah.
But if any country, Israel has the least because it's carrying out a Holocaust. Yeah, so he calmly destroyed this character, Tony Dakupoli, and this is the guy that was interviewing him, by the way. I mean, this is not really the focus of what I want to say here about Ta-Nehisi Coates and his evolution, but this is so funny. Tony Dakupol, my adult circumcision, how I made the cut for my new religion. To remain uncut, I was told, is to remain spiritually cut off from the Jewish people. So this guy married an Israeli woman, I think.
Yep, he did.
And I came to this knowledge on the way to the altar of all places. I was engaged to a nice Jewish girl taking some free conversion classes at a big progressive Manhattan synagogue. It's tough to convert. You have to do classes. I wanted to learn something about that mattered to her, and and the more I learned it, and the more I learned, the more it mattered to me too. When one of my own rabbis, who is gay and female, slipped me the number of a moil, a professional snipper, I laughed it off. Classic Jewish humor, but no. Medically speaking, I was already circumcised. But that's no good for God. He needed a drawing of blood. To remain uncut, I was told, is to remain spiritually cut off from the Jewish people. So he got circumcised twice, the guy who is dressing down Ta-Nehisi Coates, just because of his Israeli wife or his Jewish wife. So, I mean, we call him two-cut Tony. He genitally mutilated himself after already being circumcised in a religious ceremony for his wife. And he wasn't really like raised Jewish. I mean, this is wild to me that these characters in the media are like playing this role. Two-cut Tony.
And you notice, the way that clip starts off, where he talks about, if I take away your accolades, your book publisher, you can see what he's saying there. He's saying that he judges people in media based on their stature.
Yeah.
And he's livid that someone with the stature of Ta-Nehisi Coates will come out and criticize the holy state of Israel, which you're not allowed to do. And therefore,
and then all of a sudden it's like, why did I slash my penis twice? Like, if this guy's right, then maybe like I made a big mistake in letting that moil slash off whatever was left of my foreskin. Like, how do you do it twice? Like, what is left there?
Yeah, well, and like the foreskin is an analog for the soul, which he sold out for a spot on CBS News, because to get that spot in that chair, you have to sell out and you have to praise Israel and attack people who criticize Israel. So Ta-Nehisi Coates, being someone who's accepted in the establishment, is disrupting that. And he doesn't know what to do with it, and therefore it led to that. And apparently it's become a big controversy, like inside CBS, that there was some people who were upset with the way he handled that. Others defended him, but it's become a media controversy. And meanwhile, of course, the backlash against Ta-Nehisi Coates continues. So here's his former magazine, The Atlantic, coming out with a piece called "The Problem with Moral Purity." In his new book, The Message, Ta-Nehisi Coates sacrifices necessary complexity. And by the way,
it's always about that. It's complicated. This is very complicated.
The author of that piece, Daniel Bergner, the last time he wrote for The Atlantic was 10 years ago, when he wrote about, is stop and frisk worth it? Where he basically defended the policy of stop and frisk, which disproportionately targets young black men. So, fitting for that he's not
like
going.
Bring in the stop and frisk guy.
Yeah.
We got a black intellectual has gone off base here.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Goldberg's calling him in. I mean, it's an amazing story that hasn't really been written. And I mean, I don't think the story's done. I'm still contemplating all the different scenarios of two-cut Tony's second circumcision. Like, was it like a complete amputation, like John Wayne Bobbitt? Or did he get Mitsitsa Bapé? Look that up. I don't want to explain it. Like, we put this show on Pacifica, so it has to get past like the FCC. So I can't explain what Mitsitsa Bapé is, but look it up. But no, I mean, I have had total contempt for Ta-Nehisi Coates throughout his entire career, because he basically was the literary version of Obama, who was being propped up and propelled and manufactured in many ways by the same forces. I mean, he was a creation of the Atlantic magazine. And I knew people who had worked at the Atlantic who were like, yeah, we're all just like helping him craft his pieces. I was like, I don't have any help crafting my pieces. But Obama basically wanted young black intellectuals who would sing his praises and market him. And that's what Ta-Nehisi Coates was. And then like the powerful Jewish Zionist forces behind magazines like the Atlantic, like Jeffrey Goldberg, wanted a black intellectual who would play footsie with Zionists without getting directly involved with them in a kind of like, and look like a complete sellout. And Ta-Nehisi Coates struck the perfect balance, and he was prolific as a writer, and he was pushed forward. This is something he wrote in 2008, The Negro Sings of Zionism, from May 2008. And he's basically equating Zionism, the Zionism of Theodore Herzl, with the return to Africa movement and black nationalism of Marcus Garvey. And this is something that would be music to the ears of a Jeffrey Goldberg, or even a Bill Ackman, or one of the Upper East Side funders of the Atlantic, which has made it into this pro-Israel Hasbara publication.
Yeah, I remember in one of his most famous pieces, The Case for Reparations, he cites Israel in a positive light, as a model for Black Americans to follow. And I remember also he criticized you once.
He called me a racist.
When you interviewed racist Israelis and put them on camera? Was that what that was for?
Oh, on multiple times he attacked me. all to suck up to like the people who were propelling his career. First, he called me a racist because I published a video report about the protests in Queens against the acquittal of the cops who killed a young black man named Sean Bell. So why would Ta-Nehisi Coates have any problem with that? It was because Barack Obama said that the decision had to be respected because he was running for president and wanted to be respectable. So I interviewed some people there about what they thought about Obama saying that. I personally didn't say anything about Obama. And so he came in and wrote this whole blog post calling me a racist because he was so determined to see Obama elected because he was going to ride Obama's coattails to prominence. And he would been given access to the Obama campaign. He was feeling important. This tool, Adam Serwer, who's now like MSNBC's justice correspondent or something, wrote another post calling me a racist at the time too, under an anonymous profile. Then my piece, Feeling the Hate in Jerusalem, which showed racist American Jewish, drunk American Jewish kids in Jerusalem, basically calling for Obama to be killed after his Cairo speech, where he was basically saying the U.S. needs to have an accommodation with the Arab world. Ta-Nehisi Coates denounced me again there, and Jeffrey Goldberg promoted his denunciation of me. It was not long before Ta-Nehisi Coates was taken into the Atlantic and went on tour with this former Israeli prison guard, Jeffrey Goldberg, doing talks about like racial reconciliation around the country. I mean, here's some photos of like them hanging out together at South by Southwest. And, they did lots of talks and they're just buddying around with the most prominent Zionist pro-Israel propagandist in the country without really thinking about it.
Well, trying to, be positive now. He has thought about it now, obviously. And whatever led him.
Wait a minute. And so, yes, he's trying to be positive about it, but then he publishes this book. For 8 years we were. What was the book called? I mean, we were 8 years in power. We were 8 years in power, and it was just a hagiography for Obama. It was like in the spirit of this article that he wrote for The Atlantic. It all just kind of identity politics, no interest in the policies that Obama pursued or the wars or his destruction of large swaths of Africa through Libya. It was just, my president was black. Nostalgia for a time when we just had a black president, and that's all that mattered. And Cornel West really took Ta-Nehisi Coates to the woodshed at this point, and he disappeared from Twitter. He quit Twitter because of the backlash of the hollowness of these politics. Yeah. And he kind of disappeared for some time. He wrote a novel that was promoted by Oprah Winfrey's book club. It didn't really register with anyone I've ever met. I still don't really know what his first book was really about. And he, I think himself, has joked that it was like what every white person had to buy just to seem like they were with it.
Between the World and Me.
Between the World and Me. I'm like, what? I remember talking to some white liberals about it, and I couldn't understand what they thought the meaning of the book was. But he was being put forward for political reasons, and it was, the Obama, Jeffrey Goldberg axis. And now he has come forward. I think he disappeared for some time. I think he went through some reflection. And he was always also promoted as kind of a new James Baldwin-like figure. But James Baldwin was a trenchant critic of Israel, of colonialism, of French colonialism. He was an internationalist. He was a real threat to the establishment. And I never saw that from Coates at any point. And, now he's sort of, I think, becoming an actual threat because he was built up by the very forces that have been propagandizing for the genocide that Coates is now kind of taking apart. He went away. I was like, whatever happened to this guy? And he made one statement in October about Israel's assault on Gaza and how it reminds him of Jim Crow. And then he disappeared. And now he's come out with an actually meaningful book that has a clear message that I think is actually a threat. And now
Yeah.
they're acting against him.
Yep. Yeah. It must have been, you know, he knows obviously James Baldwin and his legacy. It must have been terrible to be compared to someone who he was not embodying at all. And I think perhaps, I mean, whatever happened, he's certainly now rising to the moment. And, you know, whatever short-sightedness he had in the past and opportunism he had in the past, you know, I welcome what he's doing now. It is very powerful. And, you know, he is a very talented writer. That's one thing I've always thought about him, even if I didn't agree with his politics. So it's great to see him actually using his talents for good, you know, and in the tradition that he's been associated with, people like James Baldwin. And that's why the establishment is now turning on him.
We'll see. I mean, I think he is a little bit ahead of the, well, I don't know if he's ahead of the curve, but there's obviously a grassroots tailwind behind him that also emerges from within the Democratic Party's base. Young people who identify with the Democratic Party or progressivism pretty much agree with his message now. So he may be going against an establishment that's on its way out, but it's an establishment with billions and billions of dollars that's connected to the financial center of the most powerful empire in human history. So he's going to face some pretty heavy resistance. And I think, you know, despite all the pretentious, opportunistic, and outright bad things he's written in the past, when I say bad, just like attacking me for trying to expose the same things he's trying to reveal now, but to do so 15 years ago, he deserves to be commended. I mean, we have to welcome people and their people's evolution. I've evolved on some issues, so it's a positive. It shows a positive development. Actually, his aunt defended me when the Women's National Democratic Club invited me to speak, and there was pressure on them to cancel me, and I was able to give my speech on the genocide Democrats. And I think it's something that Black people in America are feeling right now. Is they're sick of being told by powerful Zionists that they can't speak up for Palestine and that they can't relate to it.
Yeah. And when you're in the gray zone, I mean, this is just something we're used to, is people who used to attack us for positions we have end up joining us and pretend that they didn't attack us, you know. And certainly we're going to see that with many other issues, including like the Ukraine proxy war. If you remember that one, anybody remember the Ukraine proxy war, which nobody talks about anymore, but back, you know, when Russia invaded, you couldn't criticize U.S. policy like we were doing. But now, of course, I don't see anyone trying to defend the U.S. policy because it's a disaster. It's just, you know, what can you say about it anymore? So that's just the pattern we're used to. And I certainly think Ta-Nehisi Coates could have stayed silent. He could have just, you know, lapped up the liberal fame he has and acceptance and just rode that for the rest of his life. But he chose to do something meaningful with his platform, and hence the freak out. And I'm sure we'll see more attacks on him because, I mean, he crossed like the biggest red line of all, which is criticizing Israel. Yep.
Well, he crossed a big red line. I think if he said, why are we funding neo-Nazis in Ukraine, that'll be the end of him. I think that's the real red line with liberals.